It's some of the bizarre conversations you end up having about the color of alien blood, or you're talking to an active member of the CIA about how they would get out of a given situation. All those are facets of a director's life doing the kind of shows I do.
You're just not a killer, Charlie.
You're just a nerdy fellow that works on computers. What you doing? Just gonna kill you.
You have such an incredible range of credits as a director, but when you're starting a project like The Amateur, does anything intimidate you still?
I'm not sure I'm intimidated. I'm always nervous. I'm nervous at the start of a production. I did a creative panel not long ago with leaders in different creative industries, and there were about 4 of us. There was somebody who worked in developing fashions, and there was somebody who worked in publishing, and they talked about the creative lead time and how you look for the 6 months, the year, and the 2 years to build up your team, to give them the mission, and then to start to carry it out. And guys, I have 6 days. I have the equivalent lifespan of a fly to get things up and going, to communicate what the vision is for the film, and to bring that team on board so that we're all heading in the same direction. That's scary. It's also, every time, it is hugely stimulating and exciting. And then you get day one. Day one is probably the most intimidating thing, because you've talked about your shot palette, you've talked about the picture performance, now you have to get it on film. Now you have to start to shoot it. And that's always scary.
You surprised me, Charlie. I can't tell you how rare that is.
Well, those were good lessons.
The movie takes on these huge themes of justice versus vengeance. When you're on set, when it is day one, are you talking about that stuff with the cast, or are those discussions already over?
I will have talked about all of that. I mean, Rami and I, for example, spent days in a rehearsal room just turning the pages, charting his character, deciding what he wanted from Charlie wanted from a given moment or from each scene, so that when the pressure's on set, you've at least got a shorthand, you've got something of a map of where to go. But you still do have those conversations, and as a director, you've got to be deciding, have I got the right beat and mood out of this scene? Is this shot going to give me the connection I want? The best thing about filmmaking is whatever plans you make, it's an organic process. The film is a living thing, and you have to stay responsive to it as it develops during the shoot, during the edit, right the way through post.
You recognize her?
If you jump really fast, you might survive the blast.
Right!
I know you got to work with real CIA officers on set to help inform choices. Were there any moments where you had to weigh the realistic thing they wanted versus what would be most dramatic or interesting in that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair to those experts, they understood that also. We went into this with a rule that we were going to be as rooted as possible. We were going to have everything, so the tech, the operational parts of it would feel as rooted and real as possible, so that the actors could bank on that and the audience can depend that we're pretty close, and they're not going to be going, oh, just doesn't feel true or real or possible. And then we would elevate it, because we got firm foundations. We could build another few stories. We could make it just that little bit more heightened, cinematic. And I think that's what we've done. You've got to reach for the big screen. You've got to fill that big screen. And that was always the target.
You have the wrong person. No, I have exactly the right person.
You have worked with incredible actors, Rami Malek and Lawrence Fishburne on The Amateur, but also Anthony Hopkins, Gary Oldman, Helena Bonham Carter, Andrew Scott. Have any patterns emerged for you that you've seen that make the greats great?
It's Gary who said, Liz, you've got to do 3 things. You've got to turn up on time, know your lines, and not walk into the furniture. And of course, he's the great artist of understatement. What those 3 actors, Helena, Anthony, and Gary, all have in common was they would live with the script. They'd live with the project for weeks, if not months. Helena won't take a gig if she hasn't got the run-up time that she feels she needs. And Gary and Tony both use pretty much the same phrase, which is not how well you know the script, it's how long you've lived with it. So that by the time they come on set, I mean, the first day of Slow Horses with Gary, he's in the costume and he looks like the Jackson Lamb we've come to know. But something, as we say action, something happens to him almost physically. It's almost some strange kind of transformation as he takes on this persona that he's adopted for that role. So the length of study, the ability to immerse themselves, the ability to shut out the production noise, that's what makes the difference.
Well, no, you don't get to ask questions. That's for spies who haven't It's a bed.
You've got an incredible cast on your new show, Lanterns. Have you seen a new side of any of those actors that you've been working with that's excited you?
Yes, I mean, Kyle quite early on said to me, look, this is my comfort space. I can do this. The thing you need to work with me is to find the areas that I don't normally go to. Now, I'm going to wait for you to see the show to see what those are. But what Chris Mundy, the showrunner, the writer-showrunner, has done so brilliantly is make it really rooted. This is a rooted kind of buddy cop approach. It feels more like No Country for Old Men or True Detective or Fargo than a typical DC show you've seen before. So it's got a whole new flavor to it. Kelly is so great because she can adapt. They all have the ability to feel understated and real. And there's something exciting about having people play in what is eventually a superhero genre, but coming from a place of rooted understatement.
I know exactly what was in store for me.
Okay, I want to talk about 5 things that you as a director need on set. What was one piece of camera or lighting equipment that you absolutely needed for The Amateur?
It was camera equipment. It's not that rare, but we decided that once we went on mission with Charlie, we should be dynamic, kinetic, we should be on his shoulder. So we used a couple of camera rigs, Easy Rig particularly, just to be right handheld with him on his shoulder, on his cheek, going into any setting.
Where is he now?
He's in the stairwell, 3 floors above.
What's the food or snack you need on set?
That's easy. I have to have dark chocolate, at least 80%. And I have been heard screaming the word just chocolate. I don't scream on set at all, except for chocolate.
What's the mantra you need for yourself or for your team?
Is it good enough? And people will say, hey, James, that's 1 week down. And I tend to come back with, okay, that's 1 week less to make it brilliant. I constantly, could we have done better? If an AD comes to me and says, do we really need this next shot? And I'll go, no, I think we can get away with it. If they say brilliant, I go, no, that's not brilliant. That just means we're making the schedule, but I didn't get the shot. So I'm afraid it's about punishing myself to try and make it better.
There was a time you could find an oil drum or a corpse to use as a target.
What's your creative secret weapon?
Each night, prepping for the next day, I walk around my room with the shot plans, with the script. My daughter always used to tell me I looked like I was doing Tai Chi because I can plan camera moves and I move in particular ways. I guess it's preparation. It's preparation because once you're prepped, you can allow yourself to switch off for a bit.
You got to go into a different mode.
And it is combat mode. I'm far better. Even if I'm filming in London, I tend to go and stay in a hotel because the absorption in the process is so total.
I want mission-specific training, cash, and a new identity.
Who's your go-to? Who's the person you need on set?
I always call it, there's a kind of a central platoon, and that is my first AD, my cinematographer, and my designer. And the designer obviously is often deputized by the art director on that moment. But those 3 people, we will have worked so closely in terms of designing the show and the structure for how it's going to be shot. At best, it's the 3 of us on the technical recce, knowing what a space is going to feel like, how the scene is going to come alive within it.
What makes the production designer such an important part of the process?
So I have 3 jobs really: to tell a story, build the characters, and build a world. And the building of the world is obviously hugely dependent on the brilliance of your production designer. It's about the choice of locations, it's about the use of VFX, but the production designer will be at the forefront of that process.
How do you build out your crew? Have you used IMDbPro to help?
I mean, it is about the networking. I belong to, and I'm vice chair of Directors UK, which is the equivalent of the DGA in the UK. I think belonging to organizations like that is invaluable. I mean, I use IMDbPro every day or very nearly. And if there's a show that's really impressed me, I will go down to see who's made that in all the various departments, not just who the writers and directors were. I'm interested to see who's been part of that and who's made some of those decisions. I think it's a far safer place to go than just looking at who got nominated, because there's so much marketing involved in nominations. People will say to me, how do you do that? Where do you get that? The answer in the end is hard work. I get really annoyed when somebody comes and pitches me an idea, and I've seen 3 shows telling exactly that story in the last as many years. So you have to watch, you have to study, you have to know who's in the credits.
I've seen on Instagram that you share sometimes some behind the scenes photos and you use the hashtag a director's life. I wonder what that phrase means to you. What does it mean to live a director's life?
Oh, look, I bloody love it. I can't tell you any other way. I wanted to do this since the middle of my teenage. I have had such adventures. You catch me the night after the New York premiere when I had this astonishing cast. Friends, family, filmmakers were looking out over Columbus Circle. And I'm struck by the journey that we start off in the dirt and the grime of location in some car park somewhere, having to get a camera onto a dolly to point it in roughly the right direction to capture the performance before the actor is tired. But there is a thrill, there is a risk to every scene you undertake. And so it's the people you meet, it's the places that you get thrown, it's some of the bizarre conversations you end up having about the color of alien blood, or you're talking to an active member of the CIA about how they would get out of a given situation. All those are facets of a director's life doing the kind of shows I do.